Now, in just over a year, nearly 1 million Rohingya Muslims have fled a brutal crackdown by the Burmese army. Today, they live in the world's largest refugee camp in neighbouring Bangladesh, a stone's throw from the land they have inhabited for generations. Well, Canadian writer and global affairs analyst Michael Bociurkiw has just returned from Kutupalong camp, and he joins us now in the studio. Welcome to the programme, Michael. Now, you've just returned from the camp, so tell us a little bit about the conditions you encountered there. Well, actually, they're quite good, which is quite something for about 750,000 to 1 million people there. They're relatively well fed. There's drainage, that sort of thing. The infrastructure is actually quite good, but I think it's what's happening underneath that is really concern to me. For example, for whatever reason, the UN, which basically manages the camp, caved into Bangladesh demands not to give education to children 14 and over, and those 14 and under only getting really an informal education, and it's what UNICEF calls possibly a lost generation for that reason. And in fact, Michael, we're looking at some of the footage that you filmed while you were down there visiting them in the camp. Tell us about what the future will be for these Rohingya refugees. Where can they go? Well, it's very bleak, to be honest. The government, which, by the way, faces an election in December, which they'll probably win, wants to move 100,000 of them to a very remote island in the Bay of Bengal. And then I'm also picking up signals that the government is actually thinking of repatriating at least 6,000 in the coming weeks back to Myanmar, which they have no security guarantees. They're not going to get their citizenship. So I think there are very few options left other than for them to stay put them to work productively and contribute to the Bangladesh economy. This has been done before elsewhere in the world, but it would really be a temporary solution, I think. And in fact, we've been covering some of the stories around the relocation of them onto this island. There's lots of concerns about this island. It's incredibly vulnerable. It's remote, subject to cyclones and all of Bangladesh's terrible weather. So in comparison, I mean, you talk about how these refugee camps actually look pretty good. There's an infrastructure in place. There's a community in place. But after decades of humanitarian work, you've travelled around the world, covered this in many different places, and having experienced this terrible experience of hopelessness, you call it. How does this compare to other situations? Well, I mean, it's really something to go to the world's biggest refugee camp, because as far as the eye can see, you see houses and people. But I think in this one, it's very different. You really see the fear in people's eyes, especially in the women. And, they told us stories of how they fled Myanmar. Villages burned, rapes, that sort of thing. So it's really what is underneath that you don't really see, that isn't evident. That is why I'm really advocating that, again, education be provided, but also they make their lives productive, put them to work so that they get their confidence back. Very quickly, if you could sit down tomorrow with Aung San Suu Kyi, what would you tell her? Use what little more authority you have left to stop the killing, the genocide, and for once and for all, solve this problem with the Rohingya people. They've been on the move for generations, and it's time that an internationally brokered solution with her leadership solve this problem once and for all. All right, Michael Bociurkiw, thank you so much for coming in and speaking about your experience.